Hello folks, welcome back to the Edupedia world and I am Abhinay Gupta. Today again we'll continue with the topic, the meeting of board and its powers. Right? So in the previous lecture we have discussed in detail the entire section 188. Yes, that relates to the related party transactions. Right? So we have seen the definition of what related party means as per section 2 clause 76. We have also seen what are the transactions that will be covered under section 188, right, and the other provisions of this section as well, right. So since we have completed all of those, we'll give a quick revision through it and then we will discuss the questions that have been asked in your previous examination, right. And I'll give you a crux, like there are basically 6 points that you generally need to repeat in your questions. Like the questions that you are asked would include, when you write your content, that okay, this is the provisions of the section and then this is what the question has demanded and this is our conclusion. So that provision is basically the 6 points that we have discussed in the class and you have to jot it down in majority of the questions that have been asked already, right. But it is not compulsory that you will be asked the same question, right. But since this section is important, as I have already discussed, we have amendments in this section, we have exemption notifications in this section. So this section stands to be one of the most important sections for your May 2016 examination, right. And if you expect a question from this, you will expect a good length question. So it is better when you know that yeah, this is predicted, this is a high importance topic, so let us be well prepared with it, right. So we'll get into the quick revision. So we have section 188, related party transactions, and we'll read it with rule 15 of the company's meeting of the board and its power rule 2014, right. So first of all, we have seen the definition of section 2 clause 76, the meaning of the related party, right. So we have seen basically the two people in the company that are covered are the directors and the key managerial persons, right. And then we'll also include their relatives. Now we go on to including different persons. So one is the firm in which that director, that KMP, the manager, or their relative is a partner. Firm is over. Then we come down to the private company in which the director or the manager is a member or director. Then the private company is over. Then we come to the public company. In public company, where the director or manager is a director and holds 2% or more of the voting power or the paid up share capital of that company. And in the holding, they would include the holding of the relatives as well, right. That is an important point to notice. Then private company is over. We have seen firm, private company, public company. Now we come down to other body corporates. So if there are any body corporate who is acting on the advice, instruction and the direction of our directors or our KMPs, right, or if there are any other body corporate who are instructing or directing or giving suggestions to us, to our board, both ways, right. It's a reciprocal thing. So both ways, the vertical section would be the related party, right. But remember, if the instruction or the guidance is given in professional capacity, then it would not be considered to be a related party transaction. Okay, and then the final point that we had is about the group companies. So all our group companies would be our related party, right. So group companies means our holding, our subsidiaries, our associates, subsidiaries of our holding, like that, the companies which are under the common holding. So all these companies are included in the group companies, right. And you know that we have an exemption for the group company in the private companies. We have seen that already, right. Then what we had seen, the basic transactions, the contracts and arrangement in which section 188 applies. So first of all, what we saw is the contract and arrangement where the contract of sale, purchase or supply of any goods or material. We have discussed, we have basically 3 things, either in dealing in commodity or service or the property, right, the fixed assets. Then we have selling or otherwise disposing of or buying properties of any kind. And then with property we have one more point, that is leasing out the property, right. So leasing of property of any kind, that is the third point. The fourth transaction that we include is the services. So if you are availing or rendering any services, we would include it in the section 188 transaction, right. Then we have, if you appoint an agent for any of the above action, for selling, for rendering service, for dealing in properties. If you have entered into these transactions through an agent, that means indirectly, even then we would consider it to be covered under section 188 transactions, right? Then we have, if there is a related party, right, and if he is appointed in the office or place of profit in the company, in the subsidiary, or in the associate. Now, what is office and place of profit? That we have also discussed that, right? In the case of director, if he is earning any remuneration over and above the normal remuneration that all the directors are earning, and for any other person, if they are holding any office into the company for which they are getting a remuneration of any amount, we would consider it to be an office or place of profit, right? And then if there is a relationship with the underwriter, if there is a transaction with an underwriter, so underwriting the subscription of any securities or derivatives would also be covered under the section 188 transaction, right? Then moving on, we have seen the legal requirements. Now these legal requirements are basically the 6 points that you have to write it down in most of your answers. The legal requirements of section 188, right? Whenever you are asked a question of 188, you can notice that this is one specific aspect that is required to be written whenever you're dealing with section 188. So what are the legal requirements that we have? First is that we have to pass a consent in the board meeting. So a board resolution needs to be passed in the board meeting, right, to enter into any related party transaction, right? Then we have that the agenda should contain the prescribed particulars. When you're sending an agenda for the board meeting, it should contain the prescribed particulars. We have discussed it. Yeah, will include the name, the relationship, the nature, the material item, the material terms and stuff, all those things, right? We'll not get into detail again. Then we have interested directors shall not attend the meeting. They're not allowed to vote, they're not allowed to discuss if they're interested in the contract that is being discussed along with the related party, right? Then for certain items, like for those transactions that we have seen that are covered, there is a bandwidth defined, there is a ceiling defined, right? So if you cross that bandwidth, if you go beyond that limit, then you would also have to pass a prior SR. But as per the latest amendment, we have seen that we can do well with the ordinary resolution. We do not require a special resolution anymore. This was the amendment given in June 2015, right? Then we have explanatory statement to the notice should contain the prescribed particulars. Now what are the prescribed particulars? The name of related party, the name of the directors who are in relation, what is the relationship, and those kind of things would also be included in the explanatory statement that is annexed to the notice of the general meeting, right? And then related members are also not allowed to vote. So if that related party in any way is a member of your company as well, then that member will not be allowed to vote in the resolution, right? But now we have also seen that as per the latest amendment, in the private company, the directors are allowed to vote and the related members are also allowed to vote, right? They can participate in the case of private company only. Then we have already dealt with the meaning of the OPP, non-applicability in case of arm's length transaction or the transaction in the ordinary course of business. For those, we will not apply section 188. Then there is a disclosure in the board report. So every transaction that is entered into and which is covered under 188 will be disclosed in the board report, and also the reason as to why we are entering into such a transaction, right? We have discussed it in detail. We won't go back into it. Option to recover damage. So we have already seen the situations where we have the option to recover the damage, where the contract is voidable at the option of the board, right? And the directors concerned shall indemnify the company against the loss, and the company may proceed against the director or employee if needed, right? Then we have punishment for the contravention. So if it is a listed company, then the punishment, monetary punishment is same whether it is a listed company, whether it is an unlisted company. It ranges from 25,000 to 5 lakh. But if it is a listed company, you would also be succumbed to imprisonment of 1 year, right? So that is all about the provisions of section 188. Now we'll go ahead to discuss the various questions. So when we are discussing the questions, right, we need to remember that the basic content that we need to understand and mug up. If you don't sync it in the pattern, you need to mug up, but you will have to write it down anyhow, right? So you have the legal requirements, that is that the board resolution is to be passed at the board meeting. For that you will give the agenda, and interested director shall not be allowed to attend. And the same thing for the case of general meeting. You will have to call a general meeting and pass an special resolution, which is now an ordinary resolution. So you will specify in your answer in the examination as well that earlier the requirement of section 188 as per Companies Act 2013 is for passing a special resolution, but via an amendment in June 2015 the requirement for special resolution has been ruled out and ordinary resolution would be enough, right? Give it as a note on a safer side, because you never know who is checking your paper. If it doesn't understand any things that you don't know it's SR and you have written OR and may just cross it out. So let's play safe, let's give it a note, right? Then you have the details of the board meeting, then you have the details of the shareholders meeting, and everything goes similar. Over there you have to send agenda, here you are sending an explanatory statement. Again you'll have to send the same particulars inside, and then over here also the related member will not be allowed to vote, right? That is it. So we'll be discussing basically the questions that have come up in your past examinations in 1997, 2002 and 2014. Right, so as you can see, we don't have a lot many questions asked already in the examinations, but remember in each of these questions you have 2-3 parts, so 2-3 places they have tested you already, so you have 3 into 3 9 questions basically if you try and understand, right? But what I trying to say is that now this section has gained importance because of the amendments, because of the exemption notification, right? So now you may get a question from this section in your examination. So let us go down to the questions now. So while we'll discuss the first question that was asked in your May 2002 examination, the key element in that question was the office or place of profit, right? So the company wanted some of the relatives of the director or the key managerial person to be hired on board, to be hired on the office or place of profit, right? And then they wanted your advice with the requirement of the legal aspect, right? So they have basically 3 different questions, 3 different sub questions in the main topic. So what they have is that Mr. X, a relative of the director, is to be appointed as a position of the chief public relations officer, right? And the salary to be paid is 65,000 per month. That is the first question. The second is that again a relative is to be appointed in the office of a chief executive officer on a consolidated salary of rupees 2.55 lakh per month. That is 2,55,000 per month, right? Then you had the third question. There you say that a relative is to be appointed as a managing director in the company with a remuneration of 2.8 lakhs plus other perquisites as which is applicable to other executives of the company as well, right? And now they are asking for your advice. So you have 3 situations. One is relative 65,000 into the OPP. Second is a relative into OPP 2,55,000. Third is a relative as a managing director, remember, right, with 2.8 lakhs. So how do you commence your answer? First of all, you will write that whenever you are appointing any related party, right, into the office or place of profit in the company or its subsidiary company or its associate company. Remember, while we were discussing OPP, it is the company, subsidiary or associate. We do not have holding concept over here, right? Then we would apply the provisions of section 188 of the Companies Act 2013, right? There you have introduced the section 188, right? Then you go on to specify the entire legal requirement that we have discussed. You'll say that yes, the consent of the board is needed in the board meeting. The agenda should contain the prescribed particulars. The director who is interested shall not be allowed to vote, right? Prior approval of special resolution would be required in the case of office. You remember the condition? You had a limit of a remuneration that is 2.5 lakh, right? So you would specify that. Then you would write about the explanatory statement containing all the prescribed particulars and stuff. Then you'll also write that the member is not allowed to vote. Related member is not allowed to vote. And then you will define what is OPP, right? In case of a director, what is OPP? In case of a person other than director, what is an OPP? So after you have written down all the legal requirements, then you go out with each of the sub questions. So you pick up sub question 1 and then you define that this is the requirement of the question. The question says that there's a relative appointed in a position into the office with a remuneration of 65,000. So as per the definition of OPP, you will mention that as per the definition of OPP, if any person other than the director is appointed in the office, right, and receives any remuneration, then we would consider it to be an office or place of profit. So over here, the person is appointed is not a director and is receiving a remuneration. So whatever be the amount, that office would be considered to be an office or place of profit, right? So it is very well applicable over here. But now since the limit is below 2.5 lakh, you will not have the necessity of passing a special resolution in advance. So if you're not passing a special resolution, then what? Then nothing. The only first three provisions of the legal requirement would be applicable. Agreed? So that is how you answer. Then you go on to the next question. So you will write all about the same thing. The only difference over here is that the remuneration that he is receiving is more than 2.5 lakhs. So you will have to pass a special resolution also, and all the provisions of the legal requirement 1 to 6 will be applicable. Right? Then you move on to the third question. The third question is actually where the institute has tested you. Right? So as per the definition of OPP, if you read it very carefully, then if it is an office of a director and the director is receiving anything that a normal director would receive, then we would not consider it to be OPP. And in that case, only if the director is receiving any remuneration over and above the normal remuneration that any director would receive, then we would consider it to be OPP. In this question, we don't know what is the remuneration that the director would normally receive, but since the question does not say that they are going beyond and giving something extra, it's a normal thing that, yeah, they have appointed him as a managing director and they're paying him a remuneration and other perquisite as that is being paid to other executives. So we would interpret this statement as if that managing director is paid what a managing director is supposed to be paid. That means there is no office or place of profit, and hence section 188 will not be attracted at all. But when you heard the question, I'm sure most of you had thought about the same portion, that okay, it is beyond 2.5 lakhs, so all 6 will be applicable. So remember these small little things, right? Okay, we'll move on to the next question now. In the next question, May 1997, as we have seen that the crux for the May 2002 examination question was the OPP. Similarly, the crux for the 1997 question would be the relationship of holding and subsidiary. So over there you will have to play very carefully, right, between the relationship of holding and subsidiary. Like, you'll see whether we are talking about the relationship from the point of view of subsidiary or from the point of view of holding, because your answer will depend on that. Right? Now we'll see what it is in detail, and by the end you'll understand what I'm talking about. So they have ruled out the other complexities. They say that there's a holding and subsidiary company, right, and the board of directors of the respective companies have made the following appointments on consolidated monthly salary of 2.52 lakhs. So they have already said that we are beyond the bandwidth, so if required you will always have to pass the special resolution thing and stuff. We are not playing with that portion. We are only playing with the holding and subsidiary relationship portion. So it is kind of an easier aspect for you. So you can write a general answer and you can just include, okay, as per the above, as per the above, as per the above. It saves your time, right? So you understand the first thing is, whenever you are given a question like this and then you say that this person is appointed, that person is appointed, what are you supposed to do? You need to advise. Then first of all you will start your answer as simple that over here we are attracting the provision of 188 because of so and so reason we have already discussed in the previous question, and then you will write down all the 6 legal requirements, and the 7th point would be the office or place of profit, right? You jot it down and then you go on to answer each of the subpart of the question specifically. So the first subpart says that a director of the holding company is appointed as a factory manager of the subsidiary company as well. So he was already the director of the holding company, and now the subsidiary company has appointed him as a factory manager. Now what do you have to say? So here you will set the relationship, right? You'll say that, yeah, as per section 2 clause 76, a director of the holding company is considered to be a relative, because all the directors are relatives. So if it's a holding company and you're a subsidiary, so he's a director, he's a relative. First thing. Then you move on and you say that the relative, a director, is appointed as a factory manager, right? He has been given an office or place of profit, but again, when you talk about the remuneration thing, right, he is receiving something extra, because now when he is a factory manager, he is receiving a remuneration as factory manager. So he is receiving something more than what he would receive as a director. So it is an OPP, right? And since it is beyond 2,50,000, SR will also need to be passed. So we'll have to abide by all the 6 provisions of the legal requirement, right? That was a very simple question. Moving on to the second subpart. Over here, the question is reversed. Now you have a director of the subsidiary company appointed as a factory manager in the holding company. It is a reverse case. Now here you have a twist, and here the section 188 will not be applicable. Now say how. So over here, the director of the subsidiary company, right, he is a relative to the subsidiary company, agreed, as per section 2 clause 76. But now the relative of the subsidiary company is appointed in an office or place of profit in the holding company, which is not covered under the provisions. If you read the provisions very carefully when we are discussed, then the limitations, when we are discussing the limitation, or when we are discussing the normal transaction as well, then over there we included the transaction where such related parties appointment to an office or place of profit in the company, its subsidiary company or associate company was involved, right? So when we are discussing the limits also, we discussed about the same thing. It says the contractor arrangement relates to appointment to any office or place of profit in the company, its subsidiary or its associate at a monthly remuneration exceeding 2.5 lakh. Nowhere they talked about the holding company, your appointment in the holding company. Like in the previous question, the subpart 1, you had the director of the holding company was appointed in the subsidiary company. Subsidiary company is covered over here. They talk about the company, subsidiary and associate. So over there, section 188 was applicable. But when you go from subsidiary to holding, section 188 is not applicable. This is one important aspect that you will have to keep in mind while writing your questions. So you have seen already, we have just discussed 2 questions, and you have seen the great twist that you have noticed, and the place where you are forced to make mistakes because you are under a hell lot of pressure in your examination. You don't go around the bush to think. There is one stagnant thing, okay, this is the limit, that is the point, these are the provisions, this is the legal requirement, we go on writing the answers. But you have to think that there are places where that provision will not be applicable at all, right? The next 2 sub questions are very simple. Over there, there's the subsidiary company, a director of the subsidiary is appointed at some other office in the subsidiary. So the provisions are applicable, we know. In third place, there's a person who is appointed who had no relationship. That means he was not related to any director or key managerial person. So the provisions are not applicable. But then it goes on to say that further, later on, his relative was appointed as director. So will that case in any way bring this case into danger? Bring his appointment into the coverage of 188? The answer is no. Because at the time when he was appointed into that office or place of profit, he was not a relative. Hence, the provisions of 188 would not be applicable on him. Right? So that is all about the question of 1997. Next we have the question from CA Final May 2014. And this was the simplest question of all the 3 that you have received recently. Over there they have tested you on the definition of related party, the section 2 clause 76. Right? So they went on to say that there was one company dealing into a product, right, and they entered into a contract with a partnership firm in which the director of that company was a partner. Hence it is a related party. Then the second portion is that they entered into another contract with a private limited company in which one of the director was a member. Again relative. Third they are talking about a public company in which one of the director is a director and is holding 3% of the paid up share capital. Again relative, because the limit is for 2%, and that too after including the holdings of the relatives as well. Over here he is himself all alone, standalone, he is holding 3%. So he is covered under the provisions of section 188. Right? And then you write that all the 3 are covered into the provisions of 188 since they are relative, and hence all the legal requirements would be applicable on them, and then you write down the 6 legal requirements. So do you remember what I said in the beginning, that the 6 legal requirements will have to be specified in most of the answers. Why I said most? till what we have discussed, what the institute have asked, 100% cases you had to mention these things. But you may get a question where you may not require this. Nobody knows. So generally you know that if you are doing this section, you need to mug up these 6 criterias, right? So that is all with this section. We have discussed the questions, right? And now we'll move on to the next section in the next lecture. Stay tuned. Until then, this is Abhinay Gupta.